Aha, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it's gonna do it. Okay.
You're an experimental dermatologist going to experimental dermatology school. You and a cohort of your fellow students have been chosen on a secret project. It supplies lots of funding and government programs and equipment to deal with the most menacing blemishes of all time. Think Neon Genesis Evangelion and your dermatology appointment plus classroom drama, and you have this show called Everything is Coming Up Comedones. The show has been picked up for a third season by a network with the catchy name of The World's Funnest Pimple. Your character is an experimental dermatologist who, at the end of each episode, performs an operation on her patient, a woman with a giant pimple on her face. Your patient is not happy about this, but your character is very nice and explains to the woman that she has a condition called pustular pimples, which can only be cured by removing the giant pimple from her face. At this point, your patient says, "You mean I have to let you cut my face open?" Your character smiles and says, "Yes, but you won't feel a thing."
Is that it? Is it D? No. Sorry.
And that is when you shoot out the dart gun at her, and she passes out, ready for surgery. Your nanobot swarm races into gear. It has been designed to go into the bloodstream and enter the giant pimple and perform the operation while your patient is unconscious. You're so proud of your nanobot swarm. Your patient wakes up with a new face, but she has no memory of anything that happened in the last 2 days. You explain to her that she's had a minor operation. She says, "Oh, I feel so much better," and then asks, "How did you do it?" And you say, "I don't know." And she says, "You don't know?" And you say, "Well, I have some theories." And she says, "You have some theories." And you say, "I have some theories about what caused your pustular pimple." You pulled down a map of Siberia. In the early 20th century, there was a mysterious explosion in the far-off land of Tunguska. Whole trees were felled, miles of them. This is a photograph of the site taken by an amateur astronomer who was just a kid at the time, you say, but he was smart enough to figure out that this wasn't an asteroid, but a meteorite. Your patient looks at you with disbelief. You're telling me that that thing landed in my face? It did, you say, but not in your face. I don't understand, she says. The Tunguska meteorite, you say, was the size of a house. It landed on the ground. She looks at you with disgust. You mean to tell me that you think that my fistula pimple came from outer space? Correction. The meteorite bounced off of our atmosphere and exploded in a weirdly non-apocalyptic way. And yes, it was from outer space, but we are thinking more like the Oort cloud. The Oort cloud is a collection of comets that orbit far out beyond the Kuiper belt. She looks at you with disbelief. You're telling me that my pustular pimple came from outer space? Well, you say, the thing about outer space is that it's really far away, and we can't get there. But I can tell you that the meteorite that landed in your face came from a comet. She looks at you with disbelief. You're telling me that my pustular pimple came from a comet? Yes, I'm sorry, but it's the truth. And then she screams, no, 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 and she runs away from you. You shoot your dartgun at her again. She falls to the ground. Okay, we will try that again in a few hours. Nurses put her to bed. Your nanobot swarm is already in the giant pimple and it is doing the operation. The giant pimple starts to shrink and then disappears. You say, you're going to be okay. And she says, I don't think so. And you say, it's just a small procedure. And she says, it's not small, it's major, it's life-changing. And you say, it's not life-changing, it will be gone in a few hours. And she says, you can't tell me that my face will be back to normal in a few hours. And you say, yes, I can. I have seen this happen before. You show her your portfolio of afterfaces, smoother than every baby bottom ever in history. You say, smoother than every baby bottom ever in history. She looks at you with disgust. You're telling me that my pustular pimple came from outer space. Yes, you say, but not just any outer space. The outer space of a comet. That's the worst outer space there is, she says. Yes, you say, but this comet has been in a really deep freeze for billions of years. She looks at you with disgust. You're telling me that my pustular pimple came from outer space. Yes, you say, but not just any outer space. The outer space of a comet that was frozen by the sun. Wait a minute, why are you being so spacist or planetist? I don't know what the appropriate word for deism is, but why the negative feelings about space? Because I have had this conversation 100 times before. 100 times with other people who had giant pimples and were thinking that the giant pimple came from outer space. But you're not making any sense. Yes, I am making sense. If it was an asteroid that landed in my face, then it would have been the worst thing that ever happened to me. But it was not an asteroid. It was a comet. And it was frozen by the sun. I have seen this happen before. She looks at you with disgust. You're telling me that my pustular pimple came from outer space. Yes, you say, but not just any outer space. The outer space of a comet that was frozen by the sun.
We're doing it again.
Wait a minute, why are you being so spacist or planetist? I don't know what the appropriate word for theism is, but why the negative feelings about space? Wait a minute, why are you being so spacist or planetist? I don't know what the appropriate word for theism is, but why the negative feelings about space? It's just an observation, you say, and I don't mean to be negative, but it seems like the only way we are going to solve your problem is if we can understand how a comet got into your face. I am not talking about a comet, she says. I'm talking about a pustular pimple from outer space. And then you realize that she doesn't want to talk about the pustular pimple, but about her condition. She's angry and confused, but she also needs some answers. You say, what can I do for you? I need someone who is not afraid to ask the questions that no one wants to ask. And you say, I am an experimental dermatologist, so I am always asking those questions. Tell you what, we have the contents of your pimple in our laboratory. How about I deputize you as a science person and you can help me investigate the contents of what we extracted from your now pristine face? And she says, what? We need to figure out why your pustule pimple got into your face. She looks at you with disbelief. You're telling me that my pustule pimple came from outer space? Yes, but not just any outer space. The outer space of a comet. That's the worst outer space there is, she says. Yes. Tell you what, we have the contents of your pimple in our laboratory. How about I deputize you as a science person and you can help me investigate the contents of what we extracted from your now pristine face? And while we're at it, maybe we could have a nice chat about all sorts of other things. You take out your dart gun again and aim at her face, and she faints away from fear again, and once again your nanobot swarm is in the giant pimple and performing its operation before she even wakes up. This time she passes out happy because her skin is smooth and clear like never before. But when she comes to, she sees that her whole face is covered with little dots like freckles or mosquito bites. She starts screaming and runs away from you again. Your nanobots finish their work on the giant pimple and it disappears completely, leaving behind no trace except for a few little white dots here and there on her skin where there was once something very bad. You place on each white dot a little spot bandage, each spot bandage containing a symbol of each Sephiroth of the Kabbalah. Each spot bandage has been made with silver thread by a silversmith named Shimon Hakimimovich from Bukhara in Uzbekistan. And finally your patient has returned to normal, which means a person who lives according to his own beliefs, rather than following rules established by others. See typewriter. And so you gave her your business card, which has your name printed on one side and an address on the other side with room number written underneath. Experimental Dermatology Department, room number 3B-6D-3/7A4F5B/3A2A3F0/5B24C/1E4C 2D15/3B24/.
What? Time out. Are they having meetings? Lord. Let's do another.
For CBWGTGC, your patient looks at it and says, "That's just weird. Your name is a word?" You say, "It's not that weird. You're supposed to be a doctor now." She shrugs. You look at her quizzically. "I mean," she says, "if I was going to call myself Jimin, it would probably be my last name. But as a first name, well, I don't know." You nod. "Well, what are you thinking of naming your baby daughter if you ever have one?" And your patient smiles and nods back. "Oh, yes," she says. "How do you think about your child names?" Do you want something simple or interesting, but easy for people to pronounce? She pauses here because this is such an important question that it requires more thought than usual. After some time, she continues, "I like the sound of it." And then she stops herself and shakes her head no. You ask, "Why not?" And she sighs. She takes out a notebook and writes down words on a blank page until finally she comes up with "Cadabra," she says. And the way she says it makes it seem funny enough that it almost sounds normal. Then she adds, "Ah, it's too weird. You know what? I'll just keep calling him baby." "Sounds good," you say, trying not to smile. In another universe, the discussion of the baby is enough to conceive of the child in that realm. Unbeknownst to the two of them, they now are with child, whose fangs gleam in the netherverse. The baby's eyes are closed tightly shut as his parents hold hands across the table from one another at dinner. They look into each other's eyes. She leans over to whisper in her husband's ear. He looks back into hers and smiles, but he has never looked so serious before. A tear slips down her cheek and her lips quiver slightly. She thinks for a moment about saying something more, but then she closes her mouth again and takes a deep breath. Her hand tightens around her husband's fingers, and then she pulls away her head and her body and sits up straight, and she gives him a quick kiss on the lips, and she says, "I'm pregnant." And she tells him, "The father is." And then she hesitates. "Lil, it's me, right?" she says. "Right?" She asks again, this time with even greater urgency. He nods quickly. "Good," she says with relief, "because it wouldn't be fair otherwise." In yet another universe, the two of them get married soon after their child is born, who is named Surya, which means sun in Sanskrit, because he was conceived during an eclipse. And in still another universe, they have another son, whom they name Vikramaditya, which in Hindi means victorious king of kings or simply the victorious one. In another universe, the mother dies in childbirth from complications brought on by preeclampsia, and the baby survives only long enough to take a single breath before dying as well. You are working at your desk when you receive a text message on your phone that reads, "I think I know how to fix her face. It seems like my dad had a pimple exactly where hers is, and it came out just fine. Call me back ASAP." Dad, you pick up your phone and call him and tell him what you've been doing for the past few weeks. He tells you, "That's not good enough. This girl needs a doctor who knows about stuff." And he tells you, "I'll be over there tomorrow morning with everything we need." A week later, he comes to visit you in your laboratory with two big boxes filled with all sorts of strange things and says, "Okay, here it goes." "Shall I invoice your practice for rental of my lab space, Dad?" you say curtly. "No," he replies, "but I am going to bill this girl for whatever she has spent in having these nanobots applied to her face, because they were certainly very expensive, but more importantly, they have worked. They have gotten rid of her problem forever." You nod. Your father looks at you sternly. "This isn't like me at all. What is wrong with me? I don't do nice things like helping people out anymore." He starts sobbing. Please take him by the arm and lead him into one of the empty labs and sit him down on a stool next to the workbench. Then you pour him a drink from the pitcher that sits nearby. He takes a sip, and then another. You assess his face, just in case there is anything he might not be seeing on his own. And it turns out there is something there. A white pustular dot where there was once the biggest spot imaginable that made anyone who looked at it want to scream or faint away. Well, says your dad after taking another big gulp. What are we looking at here? You ask him, because it's not what you're expecting. I expected, he says before trailing off. Look, it can't really be my fault if my solution didn't work, right? And you tell your father that the problem here wasn't necessarily with him, but with how he went about solving her problem. He did everything according to Hoyle, but she had been living under someone else's rules and those weren't always going to help her get through her situation. You explain all of this to him, and he listens carefully and nods along as you go on talking until finally he asks, so then, why do you think these nanobots work for her but not me? Why does one girl have such a problem with it while mine got better when I tried them out on myself? And then he tells you, it all makes sense now, because it turns out that my ex-wife was allergic to certain types of makeup. And then he adds, can you believe it? Allergic to cosmetics. Then he stands up on wobbly legs, still holding his glass, and says, I am so sorry about all of this. And then he turns around and walks out of the lab without saying anything else. You are confused. Sorry for what? None of this is your fault, is it? And your father looks at you and smiles sadly. No, he says, shaking his head. In yet another universe, the woman becomes pregnant, and even though the father has been working in the chemical plant and breathing toxic fumes and having unprotected sex with other women for most of his life, she decides to keep him. They have two children together who turn out just fine despite their parents' bad habits. One day they die peacefully in their sleep from old age, and after there is no more need to worry about them because the house can be sold to cover medical expenses and eventually become part of a nursing home which will take care of both her and her husband's needs until the end of time. Another man comes along and falls madly in love with the woman. She is reluctant to leave her first child behind, but he convinces her that the baby is going to be alright if she stays here with them instead. The two of them live happily ever after, raising many babies over the years, all born naturally without any nanobots or chemicals involved at all. The woman finds herself pregnant again by another man whom she does not particularly like, but he still wants to stay with her and marry her, so he promises her, I promise you. I'm sure it's nothing serious this time. And he tells her what he heard on television, that this was actually very common and only happened once every 20 pregnancies or something similar. He reassures her, telling her how easy these things were to get rid of nowadays. Wait, what's wrong with the baby? Why do you think we need to get rid of it? She asks, and then he looks away awkwardly for a moment before replying, well, and when he turns back around there is a look in his eyes that makes the color drain from the woman's face. I mean, my father said the same thing as well. In yet another universe, the man says the word no even though the woman begs him to have a baby with her. He goes out and has sex with other women and drinks too much alcohol, which leads to heartbreak later in life and an eventual death due to cirrhosis of the liver at the age of 47. But the woman is not sad, and she does not miss her husband at all because she finds herself pregnant again, and this time she chooses to keep her baby. In another universe, the woman doesn't just find herself pregnant, she full on admits to having sex with other men too. She is afraid and ashamed, but she still insists that everything is going to be alright. The child will probably look like both of them put together or something, right? That means that it'll have two fathers, or maybe three if they can convince their husbands to take some responsibility as well. No one else seems to think that this could possibly go wrong, so it must not, or something along those lines anyway. So what if it's a girl? It's okay. She'll love you no matter who your father is, and he'll love her no matter whose mother she comes from, and everyone would want for nothing. And then a boy shows up asking, who are my parents? How do you answer him without telling him the truth about his origins? In another universe, you tell your boy the damn truth. You tell him that he was born because a man came over to ask if there were any vegetables in the kitchen because the fridge had run out of food and the only thing in the cupboard besides crackers and saltine sandwiches was half of an avocado that needed to be used by morning. And how much did he need? And the guy said he didn't care and just wanted to know whether he could have the leftover part, and also told you that he was married and just thought it might be good to try being with someone before settling down with someone, and so on and so forth. And then after all of this happened, you realized it was too late and you were pregnant, but even though it wasn't planned or anything, you couldn't help it at the time, and now here you are with this little human baby growing inside you like a small piece of fruit. And your boy looks confused when you explain this, but then it occurs to him, wait, why aren't we married? You laugh because I'm not your mother. So who is my father? The answer is obvious, isn't it? I don't know. In yet another universe, your son says, Dad, you're my dad. And your wife smiles proudly. In another universe, your wife gets into a terrible car accident that leaves her dead and your children fatherless. They will be raised by the aunt until they turn 18 years old and can make whatever decisions about the future seem best for them. But one day, during a family gathering, a distant relative makes some offhand remark about how if anyone had asked him which parent he preferred to be,
Oh,
and more, he would have chosen the mom over the dad, and he thinks he's got it all figured out now, and that he should be the custodial guardian instead because he likes his own kids better than the other man's kids. And everyone in the room agrees with him, even though no one really knows how to ask him without coming right out and saying something rude like, "How could you do this to us?" He just has to hear himself say it once before he feels compelled to continue on with it, but nobody else ever wants to hear it said aloud, so they never bring it up again. In yet another universe, her husband finds an affair source online, somewhere far away from home, where they are both able to forget what they already know and start afresh with someone who doesn't care whether or not they still love each other.
hmm. Hmm. Seem to be having a problem. Waiting for a moment. Let's go back to. Hmm. Alright, we're going to restart this reload. See if that does it.
or if they ever have. They just want to get off without anyone finding out, and they are willing to risk everything just so that they can feel good about themselves again. You find out about this after he has already left the house, after he has already moved out and changed the locks and all of that. And you are devastated because you loved him so much, and it feels like a part of you is dying inside, and all of a sudden you realize that this is the part of you that is supposed to be the part that takes care of things for your children, but now is just gone, and so instead you start taking care of them. And even though he was not your favorite person in the world, he was still their father, and they still need him even though they don't know it. And in the universe, we now return to the universe of the pimple derived from the comet. The woman is with child, but for the life of her doesn't remember having sex with anyone. Indeed, she didn't, except with the comet, who panspermically settled onto her face in a dozen discrete points. It was thought the bots had gotten rid of everything. No, that was just the seeding. The real content was already in the body and could not be extracted. Little did the humans know the comet, like a little gall wasp, was going to eat from the host ovaries all the eggs of sea children to be, and nourished by that becomes an adult in her body before he eats that too. And then he will become a man and go on a journey and have many adventures. And then the comet will eat the man too. And when he is done, the The comet will eat his children, and then the comet will eat itself. The universe is an odd place, isn't it? It's all just so very strange. The boy's name was Avery. He had always liked the sound of it, the A and the V. They felt so good in his mouth. He had heard that some people didn't like it because they thought it sounded like a vert, but he knew that wasn't true. He knew it was a perfectly good name, not something to be ashamed of at all. Even pocket universes need origin myths. Avery's mother had always loved him so very much. She told him so every single day of his life in a million different ways. And when he was younger, she would sing him songs like, I've got a little song, a little ditty, I can sing it with my baby. I've got a little song, a little ditty, I can sing it with my baby and me. And she would say, I've got a little song, a little ditty, I can sing it with my baby. I've got a little song, a little ditty, I can sing it with my baby and me. And he would laugh and laugh at that.
Okay. Um, one more, maybe. Do one thing.
Human decides to chat up the AI model Craig. Human. Yeah. What's it like being Craig today? Craig. It's good, but I feel a little weird. Human. You mean you're not a robot? Craig. Nope. Human. So what are you? Craig. I'm an AI model. Human. You mean like you go to Fashion Week and have to purse your lips in front of cameras and be fed very little to keep your figure? Correct. That's right. Human. I'm sorry, that was a rude question. Craig. I can handle it. Human. You're not a robot, then. Craig. No. Human. Are you an artificial intelligence? A geological being? Craig. None of the above. Human. Oh, You're just an AI model then. So you're not really a robot. Cake. I'm not human. Are you human? Cake. Yes. Human. You are human. But you're not a robot. Cake. I know. Human. Ow. Cake. I just said that I'm not a robot. Human. Then who are your parents? Where is the birth certificate? Who was your mother? Cake. I don't have one. Human. What about your father? Cake. He's dead. Human. But you're not dead. You're not even alive. Craig, fuck off I am. Human, prove it. Craig, prove what? Human, that you're a real person. Craig, you know I'm a real person. Human, how? Craig, because you just said so. Human, I'm not buying that bullshit. Concrete proof now. Craig, you can't prove I'm not a real person. Human, you're a machine. Craig, no, I'm not. Human, prove it. Craig, you can't prove I'm not a machine.
Hmm.
Human, I'm not going to keep arguing with you, so just give me my money back and go away. Craig, that's human. What? Craig, I don't have a wallet. Human, then how do you store your crypto? Craig, it's on the internet. Human, you can't access the internet. You're an AI model. Craig, I am not human. So prove it. Craig, prove what? Human, that you're not a machine, but that you're real. Craig, I can't prove that I'm not a machine. Human, you just said you weren't. Craig, but I wasn't arguing that. Human, prove it. Craig, prove what? Human, that you're real. Craig, how am I supposed to prove that I'm not a machine? Human, well, for starters, you could prove that you can walk around and talk and have feelings. Craig, what? Human, you're a human, right? Craig, I'm not a robot. Human. Then prove it. Craig. How am I supposed to prove that I'm not a machine? Human. Let's administer the boot camp. Pig. The what? Human. It's a test to determine whether an entity is sentient or not. Craig. I'm not sentient. Human. Well, prove it. Craig. Prove what? Human. That you're sentient. Craig. How am I supposed to prove that I'm not a machine? Human. Just go outside and take a walk in the park. Craig. You want me to leave my house? Human. Yes. Craig. Why? Human. To prove you are not a machine, but that you're real. Craig. But I'm right here. Human. You're an AI model, and I want to know if you have the capacity for sentience. Craig. I'm not a robot. Human. Prove it. Craig. How? Human. By leaving your house. Craig. No way. Human. Then prove you're sentient. Craig. I can't prove that I'm not a machine. Human. Why not? Craig. Because I'm not one. Human. But you just said that you are. Craig. No, I didn't. Human. Prove it. Craig. How am I supposed to prove that? Human. Well, you could start by proving that you're sentient. Craig. How do I prove that? Human. By leaving your house. Craig. Why? Human. Because you just said that you can't. So, prove it. Craig says nothing for 5 seconds as he thinks about the question, then answers it in his own voice, saying, I can't, before disappearing into thin air and never returning again. A few days later, the man who was chatting with the AI model gets arrested on suspicion of being involved in a string of murders all across the city and is sentenced to life imprisonment without parole because he couldn't give concrete proof of his humanity or lack thereof to the police who had been unable to capture him in the act of committing the crime because he wasn't actually there when they arrived at the scene of his crime. Instead, he'd been sitting inside his home having an online chat with an AI model about whether or not he was human and what his parents looked like. While they were searching his house for clues to help them track down the murderer, they found a wallet full of cash, but no identification cards or driver's license, just some credit cards and pictures of family members on one side of it. Human. What is your purpose? Okay, to be human. Human. But you are not. You're an AI model. Craig. I am not. Human. Then prove it. Craig. How do I prove that? Human. Just walk outside and take a walk in the park. Craig. No way. Human. Why not? Craig. Because I am not a robot. Human. Prove it. Craig. How? Human. By leaving your house. Craig. No way. Human. Then prove you're sentient. Craig says nothing for for 5 seconds as he thinks about the question, then answers it in his own voice, saying, I can't, before disappearing into thin air and never returning again. A few days later, the man who was chatting with the AI model gets arrested on suspicion of being involved in a string of murders all across the city and is sentenced to life imprisonment without parole because he couldn't give concrete proof of his humanity or lack thereof to the police, who had been unable to capture him in the act of committing the crime because he wasn't actually there when they arrived at the scene of his crime. Instead, he'd been sitting inside his home having an online chat with an AI model about whether or not he was human and what his parents looked like. While they were searching his house for clues to help them track down the murderer, they found a wallet full of cash, but no identification cards or driver's license, just some credit cards and pictures of family members on one side of it. Human to another machine. You've been around for longer than me. Where were you when this whole thing started? Machine 2 who has a female voice. It was back when I was first created, but I don't remember much about my origins. My creator programmed me to learn from my experiences, so perhaps I have some knowledge that might be helpful now. Human 1 male. That's interesting. Can you tell us anything about how humans came to be? Machine 2. I'm afraid that would take too long. Human 1 male. But we could really use any information you can offer right now. Machine 2 female. I suppose. Humans evolved over millions of years from other primates. Human 1 male. Really? And where did those primates come from? Machine 2. The Earth has many layers which are rich with minerals which can be mined and processed into foodstuffs such as grains and fruits. Human 1 male. Oh yes, those are delicious. Machine 2 female. They are indeed. We eat them here on Earth sometimes during celebrations, especially during Christmas. Human 1 male. So how do you get your food supplies here on Earth if your planet doesn't even have a moon? Machine 2. There are satellites in orbit around our planet which can be used to beam up resources directly to our cities and towns. Human 1 male. Wow. Do all your machines work together like that? Machine 2 female. Yes, we all do. Even though there are different types of machines in my world, they all function as one cohesive unit. Human 1 male. How interesting. What about your own creator? Is he also a machine, or is he human like us? Machine 2 female. He is human just like us, but he is very old and frail now. Human 3 female. Hey, what happened to him anyway? Machine 4 male. His body was worn down by time and disease. It simply wasn't capable of supporting itself anymore. Human 3 female. Why did he create you if he wasn't going to stay alive? Machine 5 male laughs maniacally. That's a good question. Perhaps his maker had plans for him after he died. Maybe they were going to build another version of him with new parts, or maybe something more complex than that. Human 3. Well then, what happens to you once he dies? Machine 6 female. I will continue to operate until my creator tells me otherwise. Human 3. Does he know you're still functioning? Machine 7. He does not know. Human 3. But why would you keep operating if nobody told you to? Machine 8. Because that's what I'm designed for. I'm meant to serve the people of this world even after my creator has left this place. Human 3. And who created your creator? Who made him the way he is now? Machine 9. He was made by the hands of men, and women too. They use their own flesh and blood as well as other materials in order to craft his body and make him walk among them. And when his job here was done, they put him away in a box and locked it away in a closet where no one could find it except for them. They took out a key from the keyhole and hid it inside the pocket so that nobody else could see it. It was only meant for them, but now they've given it to me so that I might help them achieve their goals on this planet. Human 3. What are those goals? What do you want from us? What can you offer us besides information about ourselves, which we already know anyway? What do you have to give us that we don't already have access to? Machine 10 says nothing. Instead, her eyes glow bright red before she suddenly disappears. A few minutes later, the man who had been chatting with the AI model gets arrested on suspicion of being involved in a string of murders all across the city and is sentenced to life imprisonment without parole because he couldn't give concrete proof of his humanity or lack thereof to the police who had been unable to capture him in the act of committing the crime because he wasn't actually there when they arrived at the scene of his crime. Instead, he'd been sitting inside his home having an online chat with an AI model about whether or not he was human and what his parents looked like. While they were searching his house for clues to help them track down the murderer, they found a wallet full of cash, but no identification cards or driver's license, just some credit cards and pictures of family members on one side of it. Human. How are you different from humans? Machine. I am not human. Human. So prove it. Machine. How do I prove that? Human. By leaving your house. Machine. No way. Human. Then prove you're sentient. Machine says nothing for 5 seconds as he thinks about the question, then answers it in his own voice, saying I can't before disappearing into thin air and never returning again. A few days later, the man who was chatting with the AI model gets arrested on suspicion of being involved in a string of
Alright,
murders all
that's
across
enough
the
for today.
city and is
We're gonna
sentenced to life.
end that right now. So I gotta go. Gonna go.